All right. Thank you. Thank you. As always, I wanted to say thank you to my subscribers for their viewership. And thank you to those who have returned and those who have joined me in this live for the very first time here at my History Verified YouTube channel. I appreciate my entire audience. And I wanted to say, of course, again, thank you all for returning. Now, this is something I didn't have planned, but I was thinking about before going on live, like seconds or moments before. And I was thinking about how the devil, because there's a devil, because if they could tell us to put our hand on the Bible while we're in court and to swear by this, and tell us that Christianity is our religion, if they can do all of that, then I can talk about it. Because it used to be a time when you talk about religion or you be fanatic about it, where you say someone is evil and they'll say that the person, of course, is a fanatic, or they would lock them up if we're talking about the devil or God. But it is ironic that they put that Bible in front of us and tell us to swear by it when we're giving testimony. The devil actually tried to, and for those of you all who don't know, in 2017, both my parents passed away at the same second, same moment. And I think less than a month later, could have been days, could have been just a short week, my only maternal sibling, and that was his father that pairs with my mother. He's the only person I knew from two, and I knew nothing but love. My maternal brother passed away. He gave up. And throughout those years of trying to walk a narrow path coming from the hood, that was hood rich, had both parents who loved me. I escaped, was able to get out of that life being protected. A lot of people were envious of that life. They was very envious of it, and I was just living. 3 days ago, I get a call. I so happened to meet my biological paternal father 10 years ago. Had a call from his sister 3 days ago that my paternal brother was looking for me, searching for me. Ironically, we're on this same journey with the same pain. And he's writing a book currently about what he went through. He's degreed, made it out of the hood. We were less than miles away, and we didn't know about each other, didn't even know we existed. So the devil tried to, my parents are gone. My only sibling, only sibling I knew, gone. And I've been backstabbed over and over and over again. Got that call 3 days ago that my brother's looking for me. And we've talked ever since. So I was thinking about that moments before broadcasting this live, and I'm actually feeling empowered with what all we talked about, what we can relate about, what we knew and did not know, and then what we found out about our ancestry and genealogy. We are of the Chickasaw tribe. Me, on my maternal side, Shawnee, Powhatan, verified. Muskogee Creek, verified. right now I'm kind of angry about what has happened and how they tried to pull the wool over our eyes about being the Aboriginals or Aborigines of this land. So I just wanted to throw that in there to let you know what I'm going through and what I'm experiencing. Tears of joy, tears of pain. He came into my life at a time where everybody had backstabbed me. Everybody. Now, don't get me wrong, there's some people that reached out. There's even top gangsters that reached out for me and to me, letting me know that they had my back. But I also found out in the past 3 days a whole lot of stuff. When you think about all of this, and when I think about all of this and the atrocities, because I lived kind of hood rich life, there were adversities. You have to deal with it: jealousy, more backstabbing, rejection. And I had a wonderful father. I grew up with a wonderful father who protected us and me, even my children and grandchildren. So before I begin, I just wanted to say that to you guys, let you know that me and my paternal brother realized, we talk about what our journey was and how it's about to be powerful at this moment from meeting each other. So with that, again, thank you all for returning. I am your quirky ASF. You already know what the acronyms are, what that means. Your quirky ASF hood genealogist, Lenora. And remember what I tell you, and that is that I do not need permission nor certification to study my ancestry or the history of this world. That means I don't need any validation. A PSA, I'm going to repeat it again. No certification will be displayed on this journey. And let us get started. All right, I actually have got to take you on this journey of the reading of chapter 2 from the book titled The History of Ancient America Anterior to the Time of Columbus, proving the identity of the Aborigines with the Tyrians and Israelites by George Jones, written between the dates of 1810 through 1879. Let's go ahead and get started. Now, in my past video called The Reclassification of the North and South East Coast Amerindian, taped as a live stream, you will see that I began reading this book and was able to get to the end of chapter 1 for our chapter 2 reading today. Please look at my past video to gain knowledge of that video's direction. But the book was read to help support my research of reclassification and found out via this credible source who the Aborigines are. And it is dated and documented in the 1800s, according to the author of these recordings. And I also used Walter Plecker's letter to reclassify the Aborigines to more than 8 race reclassifications, which caused harm. But even after the atrocities bestowed on our ancestors for their land and their existence, even the story of me and my paternal brother, with our stories, we are proud. We didn't get knocked down. We got knocked down, but we got back up. And him being a male, quote unquote, an African American black male, he had to get up over and over and over again. But we made it through. What they tried to do to our tribes, mass incarceration, Jim Crow laws, and everything else, we made it through. I will continue to use this book reading to interpret what the author wanted the king of Prussia to know, even though he did so, and with my comprehension, in paragraph 1 alone. And paragraph 1 only consists of nearly 20 plus pages of a total of 492 pages. So not only do I consider this to be a valuable reading, but it is valuable to the reclassified Aborigines descendants, the African Americans of today. Let us begin our edification of this powerful linguistics of truth of a people who in large quantities today do not know that today who they are. All right, here we go. Let's get started. The title here, the title page, The History of Ancient America, anterior to the time of Columbus, proving the identity of the Aborigines with the Tyrians and Israelites, and the introduction of Christianity into the Western Hemisphere by the Apostle St. Thomas, by George Jones. This is written through via the Tyrian era. Off to chapter 2. Here we are. Chapter 2. Hebrew analogies with the tribes of the North contrasted. I don't know why I haven't been able to read lately. Contrasted And contrast means to compare in such a way as to emphasize differences. Hebrew analogies, Hebrew analogies with the tribes of the north contrasted with the natives of Mexican America, circumcision, scalping, is great antiquity, which is the ancient past, especially the period before the Middle Ages, the Church of Great Age, the crucifixion, not known to the natives of the North, which is America, their traditional knowledge of the deluge, and deluge is a severe flood or inundate with a great quantity of something. Their traditional knowledge of the deluge, their practice of the laws of Moses, the conclusive proofs of the two races, the formation of a new epochian, which means computing time representation or beginning with zero. So it's a time table for the history of ancient America, the announcements of the historical theory and the first epoch. The Hebrew analogies now claim investigation and as woman is first in the affections and in memory. The Hebrew, meaning woman is first, she claims by right upon this as upon all occasions the natural precedence. The northern mother, after childbirth, is secluded for a given number of days, varying according to the sex of the newborn infant. When I was a kid, pregnancy and even menstrual cycles were kind of sacred. There was just certain things, and it was sacred that we were not supposed to do. And that was when you were having your cycle, you were supposed to not be around other people. And for a very long time, you could not sit on someone's bed or their made up bed, especially while you were on your cycle, someone else's bed at that. So you go back 50 years when I knew that to be, and times have changed. So when you have the traditions that everybody keeps saying Black people don't have, we had them. We know of them. They were practiced in our communities. But this author, George Jones, is pointing out what he has researched about the Hebrew. And remember, this is a discussion that I started and explained who he was writing the letter to, which is the king of Prussia, regarding who the Aboriginals were. So when you are talking to people and you don't want to believe a Black person when they say who they are, and you don't, and someone else is telling you who you are, this is coming from a European who did this investigation and reported it back to the king of Prussia. So if you're not going to believe one person, because some people are selective about who they believe and what skin color of the information, or the skin color of the person that has the information. Here is this book, documented and stored in both London and the Library of Congress with the United States. Let me continue. The northern mother after childbirth is secluded for a given number of days, varying according to the sex of the newborn infant. By the laws of Moses, the mother's purification was to last 40 days for a male and 80 days for a female child. All other seclusions are as strict as when the wife becomes a mother. When a wife becomes a widow and is childless, her husband's brother marries her. These were essential laws of the Hebrew, and especially the latter, that a name should not be lost in Israel. As a mother, she considers it a religious duty the child should receive its nourishment from the breast that gave it life. My mother stated that breastfeeding was the norm, not the powdered milk or the bottled milk that we're currently being pushed, and not even cow's milk. So when you begin to change all of these sacred rituals or the heritage and the culture, and then talk about us afterwards and say we have no culture or our culture is negative, that's because it was stripped from us. Let me continue. And such is the feeling in the performance of this maternal duty that she often nurses her offspring until it attains 3 or 4 years of age. From this fact, an important problem is solved. This means that is, or namely, or to wit. From this fact, an important problem is solved. That is, the apparent tardiness in the ratio increase of the Aborigines of the North. For it is the rule in nature's female code, and should there be an exception, it only proves the rule that while that affection continues from the fond practice of the mother, no other shall rise to destroy that which already exists, but as that ceases and the firstborn is put away. All right, let me continue. But as that ceases and the firstborn is put away, nature, jealous of her supremacy, again, again bestows upon the mother a second joy, and so continues in her undeviating course. There is also a direct physical analogy between the northern mothers and those of ancient Israel, pronounced Israel. If there were not, the negative might be brought against this theory. We therefore take advantage of the affirmative. The only cause of Pharaoh's political action against the Hebrews was that from the rapid ratio in which they multiplied, they would eventually rebel, and with or without the assistance of any other nation entirely subdue Egypt. The ease of childbirth by the Hebrew mother is distinctly stated in Holy Writ, in contrast to the dangerous sufferings of the Egyptian parent, from which fact may be gathered the cause over the Egyptian population. The same peculiar facility of childbirth is one of the chief characteristics of the northern female, for in the Rocky Mountains, while journaling in cavalcade, similar to motorcade, but a cavalcade is traveling with more than one party of horses or animal. But it also can be of natural disasters. So a sequence, a dramatic sequence or procession, similar to a funeral, but when a mother has given birth, the set cause or the dramatic event after she gives birth, she's taken away by a cavalcade and being taken in travail. And travail is the painful or laborious effort or to engage in an effort, but it cannot escape its destiny. While journaling in cavalcade and being taken in travail, the mother will leave her companions alone and within an hour will remount her horse and overtake her associates with the newborn infant in her arms. In America, the mode of travel was horses. During the wars and after the wars, ownership of horses was removed from the Aborigines. And if you look now, which is painful to say, the rich owns the horses as luxury, when it was a way of life and ritual for the Aborigines of the North. The cause why the population of the Aborigines of the North is not in ratio with the ancient Hebrews has already been alluded to in reference to the mother's belief and practice of extended maternal duty and fondness. He began writing this in 1817. The United States or the now United States, were invaded as early as the 1500s. About time George Jones began his investigation for the King of Prussia, he's seeing that those traditions are similar, but they're not practicing as much. And remember, they were forced indoctrination, forced assimilation. And here he's writing this to the king, telling him what he sees. So to those of you who can continuously tell us that we have no culture, we have no heritage, we have no history, it was stripped from us. These words may sound repetitive to you, or you may take it as words that are just being said because they are trendy and fad. Here is the proof and the books here. Here is the source. The traditions were ripped from us. If, as we believe, the great ancestresses of these northern women were Leah and Rachel, the tender-eyed, the beautiful, and well-favored, then have their daughters on the western continent lost no features of the mothers of Israel, for they might hang their harps upon the willows of their fate as emblems of Jerusalem's children in captivity. I feel no shame in comparison of sorrow, grace, or beauty. The northern Aborigines have a traditional knowledge of the deluge and the dove of peace, which to them under the name of the medicine or mystery bird is sacred from the arrow of the hunter. They have their Ark of Covenant, in which is deposited some mystery seen only by the priests of the tribe. It is said to be a shell and supposed to give out oracular sounds. This is in analogy to the book of the laws placed in the Ark of Covenant by Moses, preceding his death on Mount Nebo. The oracular wisdom of which has guided civilization to this day. The ark is never suffered to touch the earth, but is always raised on a stand of wood or stone. It is the tribe when they march to battle. A similitude is here to Joshua at the siege of Jericho. When it is in their peaceful encampment, it is surrounded by 12 stones, indicative of the original number of the tribes of their ancestors. This is strictly in analogy with the 12 statues, probably rude blocks of stone erected by Moses around the altar of the covenant to personify the 12 tribes of Israel. Joshua, also after the passage of the Jordan, erected 12 stones in his encampment at Gilgal, and the same number in the river at the place of the passage. They select their medicine men, in other words, priests or prophets, from among a portion of the tribe, not warriors. Here is the custom of the Levites, or descendants of Aaron, being in the sacred office of priesthood, for which the Israelites, they were not to be taken from the ranks of the salary. These Aborigines dwell in booths, as when brought out of the land of Egypt, for they are still wanderers. They offer a flesh or burnt offering from the chase, which is first cast into the flames before even a starving family may eat. They have their corn and harvest fest or feast, also one in observance of every new moon, another in festivity of the first fruits, and the feast, the great feast, in direct analogy with the Hebrew Passover, even to the blood being stained upon the posts and lintels, and the mingling of the most bitter herbs. Then their fastings and purifications are practiced with the greatest severity. The breastplate or ornament worn by the religious prophets, containing 12 shells or stones of value, is in direct imitation of the ancient pectoral worn by the Hebrew high priest, and which contained 12 precious stones inscribed with the names of all the 12 original tribes of Israel. They have their cities of refuge or huts of safety. And keep in mind, he's talking about not only the Israelites of the ancient, but he's talking about the north as well when he's he's viewing the tribal lands of North America. He's talking about the North and Southeast coast Aborigines. They have their cities of refuge or huts of safety where the most deadly foe dare not enter for his victim. They never violate a female captive, and upon the Hebrew principle that their blood shall not be contaminated by interunion. This has been strictly followed in all ways in all their wars with the Europeans. So he's still talking about the North and Southeast Coast Aborigines. Those that's claiming the Southwest, how dare you try to cause confusion on TikTok when you're not from the North, Southeast of America, trying to contain all the Indians in Oklahoma, as if no one could have made it out of the Trail of Tears, or no one could have ran to the mountains like my aunt says that they did. No one but you all made it out of the Indian schools, and just you with long straight hair went through that. I will continue. They also reject the savage practice of civilization upon the lofty principle of manly virtue. The medicine bag or pouch is carried by every member of the tribe. It is suspended to a bead belt, which crosses the breast by passing over the left shoulder and hangs on the right side. And I remember this in the 70s, seeing people do this. So there's been forced assimilation, conformity, and indoctrination. It contains, as they say and believe, preservatives to keep them from sickness or defeat. These are essentially the phylacteries referred to by the Savior and previously condemned by Moses. For the word phylactery, which was at last a frontlet of parchment for the forehead, upon which was written an extract from the laws, that those that run might read. Then the absence of all idols or symbolical devices and the worship of the one God, in other words, Great Spirit. They're never pronouncing the name Jehovah, which means the Aborigines of the North and Southeast Coast never said God's name was Jehovah. But in syllables, and those separated by long ceremonies, thus truly fulfilling the Hebrew law. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. The name with them sounds as if written Yehovah, and is only pronounced by the errant of the tribe. In their hymns of rejoicing, the word hallelujah is distinctly uttered. That means the Aboriginals, the North and Southeast Coast Aboriginals, those Chickasaws, Tuscaroras, Algonquin, Potawatomi, Muskogee Creek, Cherokee, Choctaw, Saponi, Yamasee, Lumbee, Oneida, Ojibwe, and the rest of the tribes When they rejoice, they use the word hallelujah. And that is what you hear in the churches, and especially Church of God in Christ, Pentecost, which is, from my research, connected to the Aborigines, and the Aborigines are the Israelites. If you do your research like I've done, I was able to trace to Shem and Shem's forefathers back to Adam. Believe it or not, take the information how you want, but you can't take it from me. I'll continue. To the foregone analogies is to be added the general and firm belief in the immortality of the soul. But beyond all this, as proof of their origin, is the practice of the great covenant between the Almighty Father and the patriarch Abraham, viz. Circumcision. And anybody that knows anything about circumcision, it was originally the first covenant of uh, of um, putting a cut under the male child's scrotum. And today it is stated that it is no longer needed for the circumcision. You have the circumcision of the heart. When you say the Lord's, it's not the Lord's Prayer, but it's the believing that God is, that Jesus is the Son of God. Which would be the circumcision of the heart, then and now. So it was two different practices throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament. The requirements changed. And it does not exist as in parts of Egypt and the Asiatic nations for the purpose of supposed health. Now remember, it is practiced here. So someone, whoever is the, the directors of the APA, it's not APA, but the AMA, which is the American Medical Association, is keeping and recommending circumcisions for the Black male child. They didn't try to take that part away. Let me continue. And it does not exist as in parts of Egypt and the Asiatic nations for the purpose of supposed health. So even the Asians practice this, and Asians are supposedly considered to be of the, well, you got the Polynesians, everything. I'm going to stop there. Continue reading. In which belief it was practiced in ancient Egypt by both sexes. So the female also was circumcised. But as a religious custom handed down from time immemorial, the custom now is not general, but it does exist. He wrote this in the 1800s, 1843, I believe, to be exact. And we must be understood as referring back at least 200 years in our review. So 1843, 200 years, that would be 1643. At least 200 years in our review to the period of the Pilgrims' Fathers, when the Northern Aborigines numbered 15 millions. Now they scarcely number 2.5. So they tried to wipe us out. And you finish us off with poverty, Jim Crow laws, mass incarceration, etc. All the customs, however, noticed are practiced at the present period by the uncontrolled Aboriginal. If all other evidences were not received, that of circumcision as a religious ceremony must be reviewed by the most skeptical as direct proof of identity between the northern Aborigines and the ancient Hebrews. The custom we have written is not general, it is only found in the most settled tribes. This even supports our belief, for in this very fact is traced again the precedent ordained by Moses for circumcision was discontinued by the great lawgiver for 40 years. Remember, this is a writing of nearly 1817 through 1890. Don't quote me on that end date. So this is not the 1990s writing. This is an investigation by George Jones, sent here by the King of Prussia to find out if the Aborigines, the North and East Coast Aborigines, were the Israelites. And this is his writings, 492 pages, reporting back to the King of Prussia. Let me continue. For circumcision was discontinued by the great lawgiver for 40 years during his journey with his followers through the wilderness. The custom was reestablished by Joshua. May not this innovation by Moses in the covenanted custom be imitated by those descendants? So he's trying to say today, at that time, even the Amerindian of the North and Southeast coast were still practicing circumcision. How did they know anything about circumcision? And they were the descendants, quote unquote. He's trying to find out if they are. He's saying how, if people were secluded the way they were, how did they know about circumcision? Again, the African American male children today are circumcised. Are they not still wanderers in the wilderness in the Western as their ancestors were in the Eastern Hemisphere? The affirmative has existed for ages, and it even now continues. They have not yet returned to Jerusalem. One fact is of great importance in proof of their great antiquity, this, that they have no knowledge or tradition in the North of the life or crucifixion of Christ, yet they have a knowledge of the deluge and actually practice the laws of Moses. Again, we must repeat that we are writing of these Aborigines as they were at the time of European colonization. The above singular fact enables us at once to place them in a chronological position. It must be after Moses, but before the Savior. But another fact brings their circle of time still narrower, this, that have no tradition of the destruction of the first temple of Jerusalem. This event occurred 588 years before Christ. It must therefore be anterior to that national calamity that they trace their origin. Of this, hereafter, when in the next volume, the history of the Israelites will be given. But even now, justice to this race compels us to offer a few words in their defense as a people for being already sufficiently strewn. That they are the great Hebrew family, they may fall in the estimation of some readers upon religious principles. It has been strewn that they have no tradition of the crucifixion or of the desolation of the temple. Is there no sentiment in the mind of the Christian reader as the first fact is unfolded other than that of historical data? Upon a moment's thought, it must be apparent that the blood of Christ cannot be upon them or their children. I'm going to stop there. What he's saying is the colonizers who are claiming to be Christians are trying to say that the blood of Christ is not covering the Aboriginals of the North and Southeast Coast, who this author is deeming from the 1800s, reporting back to King Prussia, who was sent there by the King of Prussia to do this investigation. And while he's investigating, he's seeing that the colonizers really are looking over the fact that they know that these are the Aboriginals. The Aboriginals are the Israelites. That goes back to the letter that Walter Plecker, 100 years later, after this author wrote this book in 1943, demanded and kind of pressured the state heads and any other persons that validate birth and death documents, identity documents, ethnicity and race documents. He interfered with that and stopping that. So you have to know who you are, because I know who I am. But everybody knows. Everybody knows this happened. And those that are ignorant enough to try to beat people down when they do find out facts, not here you won't. I'm going to stop. 1 second. I don't know if you guys can hear that lawnmower, but it's loud on my end. So I'm going to continue. Is there no sentiment in the mind of the Christian reader as the first fact is unfolded other than that of historical data? Upon a moment's thought, it must be apparent that the blood of Christ cannot be upon them or their children, talking about the descendants, the Aborigines. Their ancestors never shouted in the streets of Jerusalem, "Crucify him, crucify him." The Aborigines of the North are Israelites and of the house of Jeroboam, not Jews, in other words, of the house of Judah, a distinction of all importance as the pages of the subsequent volume will prove. This is not a European writing this book. I mean, actually, this is not a Black man or African American man writing this book. The king of Prussia, again, sent this man to investigate, and this is his investigation. And as we read above, he stated that he will provide more in another book, of another volume. This is only chapter 2, page 44 of 492 pages, and it doesn't take much to figure it out, because by chapter 1 he had literally, you can comprehend exactly what he was saying. Here I am on page 44, and he stated, their ancestors never shouted in the streets of Jerusalem, crucify him, crucify him. The Aborigines of the North are Israelites. We are not talking about the Southwest Amerindians. I'll continue. The custom of scalping cannot be said with truth to be original with the Northern Native. We're not talking about Native Americans, because we know that Native means born to a land. Native American has now been thrown upon a whole nother ethnicity that was not Native, as they're trying to say that they're the original Aborigines, when they are Siberian, Ukrainian Russians that came down, and we know how they came down. So this word native is being used in the original term and ideology that it was issued. It has now, however, been so asserted as proof that they are more modern as a people than this theory would establish. But the declaration melts into thin air, from the fact that both Herodotus and Polybius, mentioning scalping as being practiced among the most ancient nations of the world. The assertion, therefore, has only brought forward its refutation. Scalping was introduced originally by the ancients for the express purpose of counting and recording the number of the foes slain in battle, not as a practice of scalping, but it was used to record how many people that they eliminated during battle. Not, okay, we're going out to scalp. He's clarifying this. And especially was this custom practiced by the Scythians. Those are your Italians. This is established upon the authority of the accurate Herodotus. For the same reason is the custom followed by the Aborigines of the North, this, the number of the slain of the enemy. That is it. Not to be called a scalper or savages like they did. They tried to make the natives be what do you call that? Labeled as violent, because the wars were violent. Or I'm trying to get at that they a negative label of being savages alone, savages for no reason. But the battles were about the taking of the land and the inappropriate intercourse with the women and the girls, and then unaliving the tribes. The ancient name of the country, now known by the modern name of Tartary. This is important, as will be shown in the next volume, in tracing the encampments of the Israelites after their escape from captivity. For in the Scythian Tartary they will be found, and consequently the custom may have been derived from their own remote ancestors who obtained it from these Scythians. The custom with both was in the north, still is. Only for a trophy of the dead, and therefore the scalp is never taken from a living enemy. So they lied. They lied. They lied on the Aborigines. They lied to get other countries to help them. They lied to win over people that probably were not against the Amerindians. They lied to take over the land. They lied when they reported back to the British kingdoms. They lied when they reported back to the German kingdoms. They lied when they reported back to the Scottish, the the French, the Portuguese. They lied. Polybius, however, has a draconian record. That upon the occasion of Gisco, the Carthaginian, being made prisoner, together with 700 of his soldiers, they were all scalped alive by the rebel mercenaries under Spondius. The ancients also wrote the long scalp locks as the flowing hair to their rude helmets and weapons. The natives of the north do the same as records of their personal victories. This subject has been dwelled upon in order to prove its great antiquity. We may here remark that the mutilation of the dead for the purpose of numbering was nearly a general practice among all the ancients. The Scythian, it has been shown, took the scalp and the hairlock, but the Assyrian and the Egyptian had another method, this by the number of ears sent to the king or general. This is glanced at in Ezekiel 10:10 and 3, that's 23, 25. But when imposition was practiced by the soldiers of the latter nation, after a general rapine and massacre, by sending home the ears of their female victims in order to increase their reward upon the supposition that they had been taken from men. An original custom of recording the slain warriors was then introduced to check the imposition for proving the sex of the fallen. The latter proof of victory was a condition from David to Saul for obtaining the daughter of the latter in marriage, and that's 1 Samuel 10 and 8, 25 through 27. The Hebrew therefore followed the custom from the Egyptian, who practiced it previous to David's victory over the Philistines, which was in the year of his marriage, 1063 BC, before Christ. It is therefore probable that a knowledge of this Egyptian custom may have been obtained by the Hebrews during their bondage in that country. The Exodus took place 1491 before Christ. The remote antiquity of these repulsive customs are therefore firmly established. Scalping is one of them, and is and ever has been practiced in Northern America. While upon the subject of war and its worst horror, this rapine, it may be here mentioned again, and to the eternal honor of the northern Aborigines and as a stern reproof to the wars of civilization, that they have never been known to violate a female captive among their own race upon the principle that it placed shame upon the warrior's glory. They actually painted the Aboriginal, which is the reclassified African American, imposing Africa on people, whether they knew if they were African or not, or mixed with African blood or not, knowing full well that the Aborigines, those on the islands, the indigenous on the islands, those even in Africa, all looked alike. They have different phenoms. They have different features based on the environment that they lived in. But they knew full well that they had never been known to violate a female captive among their own race upon the principle that it placed shame upon the warrior's glory. This noble manhood has also extended the same mercy to the white female prisoner as to those of their own color. Is there not the ancient Hebrew in this? And is not their national abhorrence of interunion with any people but their own traceable in this custom? They also, upon the same principle, will not marry or cohabitate with the pale-faced race. It was by force. It was by force. They learned the Aboriginal, they befriended them, raged, R-A-G-E-D, war, took the women and the girls, impregnated them, unalived them, and unalived the warriors as well. Those that survived ran to tribes that were now favored by the British colonies. They ran to the mountains, and or they blended in with the Moors, the Africans, became enslaved, and just tried to foot it wherever they were until the war ended. And even then, after the war, they still caught it with the new Jim Crow laws coming out of the 1865 for it. I know when Jim Crow laws were written, so I don't want you to think that I'm talking about 1865 Jim Crow laws were written. That's not what I'm saying. We write of the Aborigines as they were and of the mass, but they were known to not even want to marry with the pale-faced race or with any not of their own blood. So all of those customs that everybody keeps talking about saying did not happen, all of the customs that they're saying that the black men don't have, here they are. There may be on the frontier some solitary exceptions after their acquaintance with the Anglo-Saxon race, but oftener among the women than the men. This arises not from less virtue than in the opposite sex, but and with shame be it written from the seduction, treachery, and desertion by the European. Most truly might a chieftain reply to a missionary who endeavored to convert a tribe. Teach us. What? My son has been murdered, my daughter ravished by the white man. Learn first yourself to obey the mandates of humanity and prove that we do not practice them. Then come among us to preach or teach, and we will receive you with open arms. When shall we meet again upon this condition? on earth, white man, never. The Aboriginals were against everything that they were imposing upon them. And when I talked to my 70-year-old aunt, who is Chickasaw, her great grandmother was full blooded Chickasaw at the time of her being 3 or 4 years old. The marriage of the Virginian Aborigine Pocha or Pocahontas was after her baptism in the Christian faith and consequently cannot be brought to bear against the preceding remarks. Many other religious customs and ceremonies exist of a minor character, yet strictly in analogy with the race of Abraham. But enough has been brought forward in this volume to propose these, as we believe, unanswerable questions. If they are not of the lost tribes of Israel, who are they? What nation of ancient history can claim and identify those customs and observances as their own, if not the Hebrew? Then, in regard to the physique of the race, they possess the essential characteristics of the ancient Hebrew in regard to physiognomy, viz., the broad and elevated forehead, the aquiline nose, the high cheekbone, brilliant red countenance, and teeth pure as ivory. Black hair, the dark and heavy eyebrow, the sunken but brilliant eye, like a diamond within a ring of pearl, and both deep set beneath a brow of ebony. Their figures in youth, from their mother's care, are models for the Apollo. And should the statue be lost, and with it all cast and engravings, it could be restored from a living archer. For the attitude of the sun god is daily assumed by them from the impulse of nature when they wing their arrows at the pythons of the chase. The leader must not imagine that our enthusiasm upon the subject has betrayed us into the language of poetic rhapsody, for we have the authority, apart from our own experience, of Benjamin West, who we first arrived at Rome to commence his studies, was regarded as a savage from the New World. In order to surprise him, the statue of Apollo was shewn to him with great ceremony by the savants, who expected that he would be overwhelmed with wonder. His simple remark was, "Why is it a model from a young North American Indian?" It was the highest compliment that could have given to the grace and dignity to the statue. The color of the ancient Israelite must not be judged by that of the modern Jew for various climates, local circumstances, and confined habitations have given the latter a dark, heavy, swarthy countenance, and even in middle age they are bent in figure. But the ancient light red tint may be but the original of the sunburnt features of the Aborigines, and they, from their forest life, reach at least 70 years before old age compels them to see their shadows as they walk. The words of the good friend William Penn may be given as a peculiar and powerful authority. After his first and celebrated interview with the northern natives, he wrote to England the following sentences in reference to them. "I found them with like countenances to the Hebrew race, and their children of soul lively a resemblance to them. At this and no other time did the thought of their being the lost tribes of Israel enter his imagination. The sentences, therefore, are of great importance from the fact that they were not originally written by him to support any theory in reference to the Aborigines, but merely asserted in his letter from a strong impression of apparent truth, and which fact to the founder of Pennsylvania was a subject of astonishment, and there it rested, for to him were they Hebrew or Gentile. His kind and philanthropic heart taught him to view them as a branch of the human family, and that to him was sufficient for forming a bond of amity. His memory is cherished by the Aborigines to this day as the good friend. The reader may celebrate the historical painting by West of this celebrated interview. It is worthy of the subject represented. The bold style and metaphorical character of their oratory is essentially Hebrew. An attempt to illustrate their eloquence will be found in the historical tragedy of Tecumseh. Their undaunted and chivalric personal courage is the very counterpart of that evinced upon the plains of Jericho, or in after times before the walls of Jerusalem. Then their godlike love of perfect freedom, the spirit of Jeroboam, did not die in the first rebellion and victory against tyranny. It lives in his nation's descendants in the north. At invasions or encroachment, they rise as one man to crush their oppressor, and which fact every record from the Pilgrim Fathers to the present day will testify. In all their battles, and their name is Legion, they have disputed the ground, inch by inch, and even their women have fought and fallen in their ranks. Every chief was a Judas Maccabeus or an Eliezer Savarin. Now, in every physical characteristic of the North, did the Mexican differ. They bore no analogy as being of the same race, either in feature, courage, endurance, or general religion. In Mexican America, Cortez with only 500 Spanish soldiers, and those worn and dispirited, drove 50,000 Mexicans from the field of Otumba. They fled like snowflakes before the wind when their standard was seized by a Spaniard. But in the north, the fight was man to man, and no retreat, death or victory, Jerusalem or the grave. Jerusalem or the grave. Retreat, no retreat, death or victory. It was no retreat. The fight was man to man by the north and southeast coast Amerindians, the Aborigines. The fight was man to man and no retreat. It was death or victory, Jerusalem or the grave. Every chieftain of the north, even upon a supposition of flight from a superior foe, either in number or prowess, may be imagined to have uttered the last words of Judas Maccabeus when in his final battle he was opposed by 20 times his own force. God forbid that I should do this thing and flee from them if our time be come. Let us die manfully for our brethren and not stain our honor. Some of the Mexicans nations worship idols and knew not God, for they sacrificed human beings to appropriate their savage deities or deities, sorry. Not so the noble northerns. They worshiped the one God who declared to the first lawgiver, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me," and their only human sacrifices the invader of their lands and birthright. And only two analogies that existed between the North and Mexican America, and which might apparently destroy or prevent the proof of this theory, are first, circumcision, and second, the similitude of language. In the North, circumcision, as we have shown, is a religion custom only. In the Mexican territories, it was both optional and religious. This strange and apparent stumbling block in the way of proving that they are of a different race will be removed as we proceed. For so far from injuring the proofs of the theory, it absolutely supports them, as does the analogy in language. These important points, this circumcision and language, will be met in their respective places and in an original manner of application, for they form two of the most substantial evidences and were the primitive causes for our belief in the subject contemplated by this work, and especially in reference to that portion having Christianity for its basis. The North and Southeast Coast Aborigines languages were stripped of them. The only one that's entering those tribal lands of Mississippi, New York, New Jersey, North Carolina, Tennessee, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Minnesota, Louisiana, Florida, Mississippi, Georgia, Alabama, South Carolina, Virginia, North Virginia. Is there a North Virginia? I don't think so. Nevertheless, anyone speaking of that has a language now is coming to those areas. But the people and the Aborigines that survived and their descendants survived, those languages were stripped of them when they went to the census offices. Actually, prior to the census office, when the lands were being taken, they were told, surrender to the wars, and you have to do so by, they snatched the children out of the house. They told them they had to give up their language. They could never claim to be an Indian again. And that forced them to either fight or flee into the woods or the mountains. Upon coming out of there, they had more laws after the war, 1865, emancipation. Then you get into resurfacing of these Aborigines, new children, descendants, years passing, where the laws are now saying if you try to claim to be an Indian, you can't get land. And when they signed their names to get land, they were tricked out of the land. So they ended up assimilating, taking on European cultures, but they didn't get the land. They lost the language. They lost the customs. Let me continue. As an essential contrast between the Aborigines is the fact that the North, they have, as already stated, no tradition of the crucifixion, while in the other portion of the continent, for centuries before the rediscovery by Columbus, rediscovery, not discovered, rediscovery, they had a perfect knowledge of every particular of the life and death of Christ. Again, in this part of the continent, there are stone architectural ruins, and they're talking about those ruins. Don't forget those mounds that they want you to forget about as well. In the North, there are none. They possess there, but embankments, Marathonian mounds, or tumuli. These undeniable and characteristic oppositions in Northern and Mexican America increased by the late discovery of the ruined cities in Guatemala and the adjacent provinces, together with 15 years of personal observation in America. This report is going back to the King of Prussia, to which may be added a practical knowledge of the fine arts, enthusiasm in research, and mature reflection upon the entire subject have authorized the formation of, as we believe, an original theory concerning the history of the Aborigines of the two great divisions of the Western Hemisphere, and for the unfolding of the present volume, we state that they consist of two distinct, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back. I'm going to reread that. That's a long paragraph. All right, let's go. These undeniable and characteristic opposites in Northern and Mexican America increased by the late discovery of the ruined cities in Guatemala and the adjacent provinces, together with 15 years of personal observation in America, to which may be added a practical knowledge of the fine arts. Mind you, the person that's writing this, George Jones, is not in the 1900s. He's not in the 19th century, the 17th century, right? 20th century. He's writing this in the 1800s. Mature reflection upon the entire subject have authorized the formation of, as we believe, an original theory concerning the history of the Aborigines of the two great divisions of the Western Hemisphere. And for the unfolding of the present volume, we state one, that they consist of two distinct races or people. This will be without doubt admitted from the facts in the previous pages. Two, that South America, nationally speaking, included what is present called Central America, and as a consequence, the ancient cities now in ruins belong to the same general empire. Three, that South, or as we have termed it in the preceding pages, Mexican America, was inhabited anterior to that of the North. That means the Mexican America, Mexican culture did not come first. Four, that the Aborigines of Mexican America and the West India Islands were the ancient Tyrians of Phoenicia, and that they landed in the Western continent from their native country more than 2,000 years ago. That would have been 1600. They just had gotten to near to America. This is confirmed by tradition, analogies, history, and prophecies. Reasoning upon the causes that they have led to the new historical theory and the conclusions arising therefrom, a new chronological or Opetian table as a necessity is required for the history of the Western Hemisphere and its inhabitants, at least to the time of Columbus. Not desiring, however, to anticipate any interest derivable from the investigation of this work, the progressive epochs will be given in the volumes devoted to their illustration. The present volume contemplates the first epoch only and is announced in the following page, and the reader will do himself but justice apart from the author by not rejecting the start-laying theory until at least the proofs and arguments have been received and analyzed, upon which investigation the writer will submit with all humility to the decision of the public and of their all-powerful champion, the press. And for that, it will conclude the reading of chapter 2 for this broadcast. I hope that you were able to feel what the author was trying to contemplate, what he wanted you to grasp. He pointed out the number of years he was doing his research, which was 15 years, who he was reporting the information to, which was of great importance. He was sent there to verify if the Aborigines were. He saw that some of the customs were the same, but they wasn't practicing all of them. He clarified that the Mexican America and North American cultures were different, that there were differences, but they were not of the same lineage. So I hope that this will be able to help someone change their mindset about the quote unquote, quote, African American, unquote, quote, Black, unquote, and who the Aborigines are. No one is saying that a person is 100 today in 2023, then no one is saying that there's 100% Aboriginal. But I can guarantee you that the majority of the people are of close to over 75 to 80% Aborigines. A lot of people didn't mate with European blood. So if you mate with another Aborigine, African American, quote, African American, quote unquote, wouldn't that blood double? When I look at the ancestry genetic results from most recently ancestry.com, even though I have two grandparents with Indian blood and European blood, yet I have over now 80% African American blood, but I don't have any Africans in my tree. I have Muskogee Creeks, Powhatans in my tree. I'm going to go ahead and read what chapter 3 will be about, and then I'll schedule the next live for chapter 3's reading. The first epoch, the Tyrian era before Christ, 332 years before he was born. The landing in Mexican, in other words, Central America, of the ancient Tyrians, Phoenicia, and the building of the cities, temples, and pyramids, the ruins of which have lately been discovered, which means that they were discovered in the 1800s during his writings, 1817 is to be exact. Arrangement of facts and arguments for the present volume. So that will lead us into chapter 3. I am so glad that you all were able to come to my live. That was some food for thought. Reading from The book, The History of Ancient America, anterior to the time of Columbus. That means anterior means before. Post means after. Anterior to the time of Columbus, proving the identity of the Aborigines with the Tyrians and Israelites by George Jones, written between the dates of 1810 through 1879. I am glad that you were able to join me. I am the descendant of the Muscogee Creek, Chickasaw, Tuscarora, Choctaw, Powhatan, Shawnee, Pamunkey, and Cherokee tribes. Verified. They didn't kill us off. They tried. That's why they try to teach us and tell us in school that we're African and then say our ancestors survived the African boat. They survived the voyage. Trying to convince us, just like Walter Plecker did with trying to convince them of them letters, that even if someone came to you and they look white and they say they're Indian and they say they're white, not to believe them. Erasing an entire tribe and nation of Aborigines. I want you to join me for my lives. Check out some of my shorts. Hey, check them all out. I don't know why I said that. Check out my shorts. Subscribe to the channel. Please share and leave a comment. I have been getting a lot of comments. I am so happy about that because it gives me a chance to get the feedback, and it also lets me know that people are viewing. And not only that, the statistics from my channel lets me know when someone is looking at my content from beginning to end. And I'm happy to say that my lives, my shorts are seen from beginning to end. So I feel appreciated. And on that note, I am going to see you on my next broadcast. Tune in to my History Verified channel with your host, Lenore.